So, have you seen this story making the rounds online? You know the one. A massive asteroid is supposedly going to slam into the moon in 2032 and then plunge the entire Earth into 6 days of total darkness. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood disaster movie, and it has gone completely viral. But the big question is any of it actually true? Let's get into it. We're going to break down where this wild story even came from and what the real science has to say.
Right, so this is the headline. This is the claim you've probably seen popping up on your social media feed, usually with, no source, no link, nothing. It's super dramatic, it's definitely scary, and wow, it is perfectly designed to make you stop scrolling and go, wait, what? But a claim this huge, with consequences that are supposedly this massive, yeah, it deserves a much, much closer look. So, where on earth did this whole thing start?
Okay, so first things first, let's trace this back. This story didn't come from some official NASA press conference or a leaked report from a space agency. Nope, this thing was born and raised entirely on the internet. It's really the perfect storm of misinformation that just found a massive, and I mean massive, audience.
So here are the greatest hits of the hoax. You've got an impossibly huge asteroid, supposedly bigger than half the moon, which is just wow. Then there's a very specific impact date, December 2032, to make it sound all official and scientific. And then you get the apocalyptic 1-2 punch. It triggers a solar eclipse and then causes 6 straight days of darkness for all of us. It's a terrifying story, but as we're about to see, the actual science just, well, it doesn't add up at all.
And this story absolutely blew up in early 2026. It seemed to spread like wildfire, especially in Urdu-speaking communities, just ripping through TikTok, Facebook, and WhatsApp groups. We are talking about single videos getting hundreds of thousands of views, all driven by this sense of fear and urgency. And the reason it spread so fast is because, well, like all the most effective hoaxes, this one is built around a tiny, twisted little grain of truth.
Because here's the thing about misinformation. It's at its most powerful when it latches onto something real. And in this case, the story basically hijacked the identity of a genuine near-Earth object, a real asteroid named 2024 YR4. But the reality of this rock is, well, it's wildly different from the doomsday version you saw online.
Okay, so this is the actual object at the heart of the story. It was discovered by NASA's Near-Earth Object Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful, so everyone just calls it NEOWISE. And here is the single most important detail. It's about 60 meters wide. So think about the size of a football field. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a decent-sized rock for sure, but it is absolutely, positively nowhere near the size of half the moon.
And what's really fascinating here is watching how the science actually works over time. See, when 2024 YR4 was first discovered, the very first, very rough calculations showed a tiny, about a 3% chance of it hitting Earth. Now, this is totally normal in astronomy. The first observations always have these huge margins of error. But as scientists kept watching it and gathering more data, they were able to refine its path. And by March 2025, an Earth impact was completely 100% ruled out. Zero risk to us. However, those new, more precise calculations did reveal something else.
And that something else is this number. Right now, there is a 4% probability, that's a 1 in 25 chance, that asteroid 2024 YR4 will hit the moon on December 22, 2032. This is that kernel of truth I was talking about. A real asteroid, a real date, and a real, though pretty small, chance of a lunar impact. This is the single fact that the hoax creators grabbed, twisted, and blew up into a global catastrophe.
So we've got the crazy hoax on one side, and we've got the actual science on the other. So now, let's put them head to head and just see how ridiculously wrong this viral story really is. This is where it all just completely falls apart.
Let's just start with the most obvious, most absurd lie of them all: the size. The hoax claims the asteroid is bigger than half the moon. The scientific fact? It's 60 meters wide. Look, this isn't just a small mistake. It's a difference in scale that's almost impossible to even imagine. It's literally like comparing a single pebble to an entire mountain.
And just to put a number on that, the diameter of our moon is almost 3,500 kilometers. Comparing a 60-meter object to that is, well, it's just silly. An asteroid that size hitting the moon is a genuinely cool cosmic event, for sure, but it is not a world-altering catastrophe. Not even close.
All right, so next up on the list of wild claims is the idea that this impact would somehow trigger a solar eclipse. The videos show the moon getting knocked out of orbit or shifting over to block the sun. But, does the science actually support that?
The answer to that is a hard, definite no. Not a chance. See, solar eclipses are these beautiful, predictable ballets of orbital mechanics. They only happen when the moon passes perfectly between the sun and the Earth. The energy from a 60-meter asteroid, while huge, is just a drop in the bucket compared to the energy needed to physically move the moon. It's nowhere near enough to alter its orbit in any meaningful way, let alone nudge it into the perfect spot for an eclipse. That's not how physics works. And that, of course, brings us to the biggest, scariest part of the entire hoax. This idea that debris from the impact would fly over to Earth and block out the sun for 6 whole days. Is there any scientific basis for something like that?
Yeah, again, this is just pure science fiction. Any debris kicked up from the moon that actually managed to reach Earth would be in the form of tiny particles, like dust and sand. And what happens when tiny particles from space hit our atmosphere at high speed? They burn up. And they create the literal opposite of darkness, a beautiful light show, a meteor shower. There's no physical way for this stuff to form some kind of stable sun-blocking cloud. In fact, we've seen other asteroids hit the moon before, and they caused exactly 0 days of darkness here on Earth.
So, if the whole apocalyptic story is completely wrong, what would happen if that 4% chance actually comes to pass and the asteroid hits the moon? Well, this is where the story gets really cool, because it shifts from fear to fascination. For scientists, this potential impact isn't a disaster at all. It's an incredible scientific opportunity.
That's a direct quote. That is literally how planetary scientists are describing this possibility. An impact on our closest celestial neighbor would be this incredibly rare chance to study how craters are formed, to see what the moon's geology is like just below the surface, and to watch the physics of cosmic collisions happen in real time. It's like a massive natural experiment, and we would have a front row seat. So this is what it would actually look like. First, there'd be a brief, brilliant flash of light on the moon that we could see from Earth, maybe even as bright as the planet Venus for just a second. The impact would carve out a brand new crater, about 1 kilometer wide. We might get a really nice meteor shower a few days later from some of that debris. The only real-world concern would be a slight uptick in space junk in Earth's orbit, which might pose a tiny risk to some satellites. But notice what is not on that list. No eclipse and absolutely no 6 days of darkness. An impact like this would release a staggering amount of energy. We're talking the equivalent of about 6.5 million tons of TNT. But where does all that energy actually go? Well, the vast majority of it just gets spent vaporizing the asteroid itself and blasting out that new 1 kilometer crater. The rest is converted into the heat and the light of that bright flash and the kinetic energy that kicks all that debris up into space. Absolutely none of it is directed at threatening Earth in any way. So, if the science is this clear-cut, why did so many people believe the hoax? It's really worth taking a second to unpack the psychology of this, because it helps us get ready for the next crazy story that's inevitably going to go viral. This is pretty much the classic playbook for viral misinformation. These hoaxes work so well because they tap directly into our deepest fears, our what-if anxieties. They take that one tiny real fact, like Asteroid 2024 YR4 and its 4% chance, and they wrap it in these thick layers of dramatic fiction. This makes it really tough for the average person to quickly sort out what's real and what's not. And on top of all that, you have social media algorithms that are basically built to reward engagement, and let's be honest, nothing gets more clicks and shares than a good old-fashioned scare story. So what's the big takeaway here? It's actually really simple, but it's incredibly powerful. When you see some terrifying claim online, especially about something scientific, your first instinct should not be to hit the share button. Instead, go directly to the primary sources. For anything related to space, that means going to nasa.gov or the European Space Agency's website, esa.int. They report the facts, transparently, without all the hype. They are your single best defense against this kind of misinformation.
Look, the 2032 moon asteroid story is just one example of a much, much bigger problem. Misinformation is always changing, always finding new fears to exploit and new truths to twist. But by understanding how these hoaxes are built and, more importantly, knowing where to find reliable, solid information, we can all be so much better prepared. So the real question to leave you with is, the next time a story like this pops up on your feed, will you be ready to spot it?